Hello from Kingfisher, Oklahoma. Today we're going to look at 6 things from 1 Samuel 16 and 17. Israel has a king, Saul, but God has rejected him due to his disobedience. And he sends Samuel to anoint a new king. And rightly so. I think Samuel's a bit afraid, but God's going to provide for him. 2, the new king is the youngest son of Jesse, who Jesse is Ruth and Boaz's grandson. That's making the new king David Ruth's great-grandson. Now we've heard of David the king. He's one of the most famous kings in all of Israel. Number 3, the Spirit of the Lord has departed from Saul, and God allows an evil spirit to torment Saul. And it makes him angry. It's tormenting him, so his servants say, hey, let's bring in a harp player that when this mood descends on you, he'll play the harp and that will make the spirit flee and you'll feel better. Saul agrees. So they bring in a harp player, guess who? Dun, 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 David. What a way to set up a stage of drama, I guess. You've got the old king rejected by God, and here you've got this new king that Samuel has anointed, and they are right there in the palace together. Well, it works. David plays the harp, and it soothes Saul. In the next chapter, number 4, the Philistines now have a new champion. This giant man, Goliath. He's over 9 feet tall. He's got stout, heavy armor. He's been a warrior since he was a boy. And he leads these guys up there, and they're going to fight. So Israel comes out. Goliath taunts Israel. He taunts God. And everybody's afraid. And they hide. And they're afraid. And for 40 days, this giant comes out in the camp and just taunts Israel, saying, you can't do anything. Send someone to fight me. Finally, David has come up to camp to bring some supplies and some food to his brothers who are in the army. And he says, I'll go fight him. And his brothers are like, well, you're just a little boy. Stay back. And but nobody's going to do it. So he goes up and he talks to Saul and says, yeah, I want to fight him. David has no armor. He's a shepherd. So that's not going to work. And Saul's armor won't fit on him. So that's why he just goes out there. He's got a sling from his shepherding and picks out a couple of smooth stones, and he is relying on God. This is yet another story, like Jonathan's story yesterday, where 2 guys go up and rout the Philistines. There is no way a guy with just a sling and a stone should be able to walk up to a giant and his army and go, God's got this. But that's just it, is that in the impossible, God has it. So you got to listen to God. You got to do what God says. But there you go. God's got it. So David's not afraid. And this is a super famous story. And he slings the stone and hits it. And it says it sinks into his forehead. Oh. Giant falls over. David draws the giant's sword and cuts the giant's head off with his own sword. Routs the Philistines. Victory. And we find out David saying, I'm from Bethlehem. Again, not a surprise there. That's where his great-grandparents had their story, Boaz and Ruth. And so continuance there. But I wanted to point out you had Boaz and Ruth from Bethlehem, and on down, Jesse the Bethlehemite, David the Bethlehemite, and on down the line we will get a super important person from Bethlehem, Jesus. And so Bethlehem's a pretty important place. Let's jump into one of the most famous stories of the Bible. People who have never read the Bible know this one, David and Goliath. It's referenced on national television in sports. So this is a David and Goliath story. So, pretty awesome. Here we go. Let's jump in. Chapter 16. And the Lord said unto Samuel, How long wilt thou mourn for Saul, seeing I have rejected him from reigning over Israel? Fill thy horn with oil, and go. And I will send thee to Jesse the Bethlehemite, for I have provided me a king among his sons. And Samuel said, How can I go? If Saul will hear it, he'll kill me. The Lord said, take a heifer with thee, say, I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. Call Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show thee what thou shalt do. And thou shalt anoint unto me him whom I name unto thee. And Samuel did what the Lord spake, and came unto Bethlehem. And the elders of the town trembled at his coming. And behold, they said, comest thou peacefully? You know, if a prophet's coming to town, he might just light you up with what you're doing wrong. He might call down the power of God. But he says, I come peaceably. I am come to sacrifice to the Lord. Sanctify yourselves. Come with me to the sacrifice. And he sanctified Jesse and his sons, and called them to the sacrifice. It came to pass, when they were come, that he looked on Eliab, and he said, surely this is the Lord's anointed before him. But the Lord said unto Samuel, look not on his countenance, or the height of his stature, because I have refused him. For the Lord seeth not as man seeth, for a man looketh on the outward appearance, but the Lord looketh on the heart. Hey, this is super important too. It doesn't matter what you look like on the outside. All the things man looks at doesn't matter. The Lord really sees in the heart, it says. What you have really going on, that's what God sees. Then Jesse called Abinadab and made his pass before Samuel, and he said, neither hath the Lord chosen this. And Jesse made Shammah pass by, and said, neither has the Lord chosen this. Again Jesse made 7 of his sons pass before Samuel. And Samuel said unto Jesse, the Lord has not chosen these. And Samuel said unto Jesse, are here all of thy children? And he said, there remaineth yet the youngest, and behold, he keepeth the sheep. Samuel said unto Jesse, send and fetch him, for we will not sit down till he come hither. And he sent, and he brought him. Now he was ruddy, and withal of a beautiful countenance. Apparently those are compliments. And goodly to look on. And the Lord said, arise, anoint him, for this is he. Samuel took the horn of oil, and anointed him in the midst of his brethren. And the Spirit of the Lord came upon David from that day forward. And Samuel rose up and went to Ramah. It just kind of reminds me of Joseph's story, how the youngest at the time gets God's anointing right in front of all the brothers. And that, you know, that doesn't sit well. But there it is. But the Spirit of the Lord departed from Saul, and an evil spirit from the Lord troubled him. And Saul's servants said unto him, behold now, an evil spirit from God troubleth thee. Let our Lord now command thy servants which are before thee to seek out a man who is a cunning player on the harp. And it will come to pass, when the evil servant from God is upon thee, that he will play with his hand, and thou shalt be well. And Saul said unto the servants, provide me now a man that can play well, and bring him to me. And they answered one of the servants, and said, behold, I have seen the son of Jesse, the Bethlehemite, that is cunning in playing, and a mighty, valiant man, a man of war, and prudent in matters, and a comely person, as the Lord is with him. So he gets all the compliments here. Wherefore Saul sent the messengers unto Jesse, and said, send me David thy son, which is with the sheep. And Jesse took an ass laden with bread, and with a bottle of wine, and a kid, and sent them to David unto Saul. And David came unto Saul, and stood before him, and he loved him greatly, and he became his armor-bearer. And Saul said to Jesse, saying, let David, I pray thee, stand before me, for he found favor in my sight. And it came to pass, when the evil spirit from God was upon Saul, that David took a harp and played with his hand. So Saul was refreshed, and was with him. And was well, and the evil spirit departed from him. Chapter 17. Now the Philistines gathered together their armies to battle, and were gathered together at Shochoh, which belongeth to Judah, and pitched between Shochoh and Azekah in the Ephes-dammim. And Saul said to the men of Israel, and gathered them together, and pitched by the valley of Elah, and set the battle in array against the Philistines. And the Philistines stood on the mountain on one side, and Israel stood in the mountain on the other side, and there was a valley between them. And there went out a champion from the camp of the Philistines, named Goliath of Gath, whose height was 6 cubits and a span. That's over 9 feet, maybe 9'3", 9'6", something like that. And he had a helmet of brass upon his head, and he armed with a coat of mail. And the weight of the coat was 5,000 shekels of brass. And he had greaves of brass upon his legs, and target of brass between his shoulders. Maybe that's a shield. And the staff of his spear was like a weaver's beam, and the spear's head weighed 600 shekels of iron. And the one bearing his shield went before him. I guess not. And he stood and he cried unto the armies of Israel and said unto them, Why are you come out to set your battle array? Am I not a Philistine, and you the servants of Saul? Choose you a man for you, and let him come down to me. If he be able to fight with me and kill me, then we will be your servants. But if I prevail against him and kill him, then you will be our servants and serve us. The Philistines said, I defy the armies of Israel this day. Give me a man that we may fight together. When Saul and all Israel heard the words of the Philistines, they were dismayed and greatly afraid. Now David was the son of the Ephrathite of Bethlehem, Judah, whose name was Jesse, and he had 8 sons, and the man went among them for an old man in the days of Saul. And the 3 eldest sons of Jesse went and followed Saul into battle, and the names of his 3 sons that went to battle were Eliab, the firstborn, the next unto him Abinadab, and the third Shammah. And David was the youngest. The 3 eldest followed Saul. But David went and returned from Saul to feed his father's sheep at Bethlehem. And the Philistines drew near morning and evening, and presented himself 40 days. And Jesse said unto David his son, Take now for thy brethren an ephah of this parched corn and 10 loaves, and run to the camp to thy brethren. Carry these 10 cheeses unto the captain of their 1,000, and look how thy brethren fare, and take their pledge. So here's some food. That's great. Just find out how your brothers are. Now Saul and they and all the men of Israel were in the valley of Elah, fighting with the Philistines. And David rose early in the morning and left the sheep with the keeper, and took and went as Jesse commanded him. And he came to the trench as the host was going forth to fight, and shouted for the battle. For Israel and the Philistines had put into battle array, army against army. David left his carriage in the hand of the keeper of the carriage, and ran to the army, and came and saluted his brethren. And as he talked with them, behold, there came up the champion, the Philistine of Gath, Goliath by name, out of the armies of the Philistines, and spake to them the same words. And David heard them. And all the men of Israel saw, they fled from him, and they were sore afraid. And when the men of Israel said, Have you seen this man come up? Surely to defy Israel he is come up. And it shall be, when the man who killeth him, the king will enrich him with great riches, and will give him his daughter, and make his father's house free in Israel. David spoke to the man behind him, saying, What will be done to the man that killeth the Philistine, and taken away the reproach from Israel? For who is this uncircumcised Philistine, that he should defy the armies of the living God? People answered to him in this manner, saying, So shall it be done to the man that killeth him. And Eliab, the oldest brother, when he spake to the men, Eliab's anger was kindled against David, and he said, What camest thou hither? And with whom hast thou left a few sheep in the wilderness? I know thy pride and naughtiness of thy heart, for thou come down to see the battle. David said, What have I done? Is there not a cause? Don't these sound like brothers? I think so. And he turned from him to another, and spake the same manner, and the people gave him again, after the former manner, the same answer. And when the words were heard from David, they rehearsed them before Saul. And he sent them, and David said to Saul, Let no man's heart fail because of him, the Philistine. Thy servant will go fight against this Philistine. Saul said to David, Thou art not able to go up to the Philistine to fight him. Thou art but a youth, and he a man of war from his youth. David said unto Saul, The servant kept his father's sheep. If there came a lion and a bear, and took a lamb out of the flock, I went after him, and smote him, and delivered it out of his mouth. And when he arose in against me, I took him by his beard, and smote him, and slew him. Thy servant slew both the lion and the bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine shall be as one of them, seeing that he hath defied the armies of the living God. David said, Moreover, the Lord that delivered me out of the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear, he will deliver me out of the hand of this Philistine. Saul said unto David, Go, and the Lord be with thee. Look how he puts the credit to God. That's right. And Saul armed David with armor, and he put a helmet of brass on his head, and he armed him with the coat of mail. And David girded his sword upon the armor, and he essayed to go, for he had not proved it. And David said unto Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. He's never worn them before. He doesn't like the way it feels. David put them off him, and he took his staff in his hand, and chose 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag which he had, even in a scrip. And his sling was in his hand, and he drew near the Philistines. And the Philistines came on and drew near to David, and the man that bare the shield went before him. And when the Philistines looked about and saw David, he disdained him, for he was but a youth, and ruddy, and fair of countenance. The Philistine said unto David, Am I a dog, that thou comest me with a stick? Remember, he's got a stick in his hand. And the Philistines cursed David by his gods. And the Philistine said to David, Come to me, I will give thy flesh to the fowls of the air, to the beasts of the fields. You're toast. Then said David to the Philistine, Thou comest at me with sword and spear, and with shield, but I come at thee with the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of armies of Israel, whom thou hast defied. This day the Lord will deliver thee into my hand, and I will smite thee, and take thine head from thee, and I will give your carcass to the host of the Philistines this day unto the fowls of the air, and to the wild beasts of the earth, and to the earth, that may know that there is a God in Israel. So, there's a lot of smack talking happening, but David basically saying, I'm going to win because you defied God, and you and your army are going to get killed. And all the assembly shall know that the Lord saveth not with sword or spear, for the battle is the Lord's, and he will give you into our hands. And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came nigh to meet David, that David hasted and ran towards the army to meet the Philistines. And David put his hand in his bag, and took a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine in his forehead. And the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell on his face on the earth. So David prevailed over the Philistine with a sling and a stone, and smote the Philistines, and slew him. And there was no sword in the hand of David. Therefore David ran and took the Philistine, took his sword, drew it out of his sheath, and slew him, and cut off his head. And the Philistines saw their champion was dead, they fled. The men of Israel and Judah arose and shouted to pursue the Philistines until thou come to the valley, the gates of Ekron. And the wounded of the Philistines fell down on the way to Shaaraim, even to Gath, unto Ekron. The children of Israel returned from chasing after the Philistines. They spoiled their tents. And David took the head of the Philistines and brought it to Jerusalem. But he put his armor in his tent. And when Saul saw David go forth against the Philistines, he said unto Abner, captain of the host, Abner, whose son is this youth? Abner said, As thy soul liveth, O king, I cannot tell. The king said, Inquire now whose son this stripling is. And that's funny. And as David returned from the slaughter, Abner took him and brought him before Saul with the head of Philistine in his hand. And Saul said to him, Whose son art thou, young man? And David answered and said, I am thy servant. I am the son of thy servant, Jesse, the Bethlehemite. So, there you go. Very famous story. David wins. Really, it's God's hand. We know this. We've seen it over and over and over again. The numbers don't make sense. The battles don't make sense. But what makes sense is that if you rely on God, he can be victorious in your life. And we need to take that with us as we look at these stories. Well, thanks for joining us. Catch you next time.